Pablo Escobar, or the undisputed king of coke, managed to fill up his vaults with loads of money. He's the wealthiest criminal in history, having amassed an estimated net worth of $30 billion by the time of his death. Hit the subscribe button and click the bell icon, because today in 10 Town, we will give you an insight of how rich the king of cocaine was. Pablo Escobar's family suffered a lot due to the La Violencia civil war. He was the third of the 7, so there were more mouths to feed than food available. This war between the conservatives and the liberals resulted in many deaths and also gave rise to poverty. Pablo, in his childhood, was a little bit more serious than fellows of that age should be. He was a thinker who always used to render roadmaps in his mind for steering his family out of poverty. His first money-making scheme was robbing tombstones, sandblasting the names off, and selling them again. He continued this business until he realized that if he used the same channels for smuggling and supplying drugs, he would make more money. But for all this smuggling business, Pablo needed a crew, so he formed Medellin Cartel. Shortly after Pablo's shift to a new business, the demand for drugs was all over the place. For example, the demand for cocaine exceeded the demand for coffee in the United States. To fill up this demand and supply gap, he started injecting around 15 tons of cocaine every day. It is estimated that in their peak, around 90% of the cocaine in the United States and around 80% of it was courtesy of Escobar's cartel. His supply lines consisted of 142 planes, 20 helicopters, 32 yachts, and around 141 buildings. Pablo also owned an island in the Bahamas, where large planes stuffed with coke would land for refueling. From that island, the drugs worth 365,000 pounds were then shifted to smaller planes and were sent to the U.S. The cartel used to make $60 million per day, since 1 kilogram of coke would sell for around $70,000, while to the cartel, it only costed around $5,000 to produce and refine. In the initial days, Pablo used to fly himself with his pilots to Panama and other states to witness the job getting done, but finally he managed himself a team of pilots who would get the job done for him. The cartel would pay $500,000 to their pilots per flight. The process was carried out by stuffing tires of the plane with coke, and also he used jeans for this purpose. Jeans were soaked in liquid cocaine so that it could be extracted after the jeans reached their destination. Escobar also started paying a hefty amount of money to the law enforcing agencies so that they could turn a blind eye. In the mid-1980s, Escobar's cartel brought in an estimated $420 million a week, which totals almost $22 billion a year. Unlike many multinational companies, the wealth of Medellin Cartel was in the form of hard cash. The infamous Colombian drug runner made it into Forbes' International Billionaires list for 7 years in a row, beginning in 1987. If you start comparing him with his Mexican profession mate, Pablo Escobar was bigger than El-Chapo in every parameter possible. Pablo had a net worth of around $25 to $30 billion in his peak time. His wealth was the 7th richest man in the world at the time. In comparison, El-Chapo is only worth $1.4 billion now. If Pablo were alive today, his net worth would have been over $60 billion, and his company would have easily made it into the Fortune 500. His company would have ranked around 140 above the likes of Visa, Motorola, Harley Davidson, McDonald's, and Netflix. Pablo didn't manage himself all that wealth mere drugs. He reportedly killed some 4,000 people, including numerous police officers and government officials. In 1989, the cartel was blamed for detonating a bomb on a plane that was carrying an alleged informant. Some 100 people died. Pablo earned money in a very notorious way, but he used to lose a fraction of it, which was very bizarre. Pablo was earning so much that every year he would write off 10% of the money because the rats would eat it in storage, or it would be damaged by water or lost. Escobar wrote that his wealth would have been around $2.1 billion given how much money he was reportedly making if the rats weren't doing their job. While hiding or storing the exorbitant amount of money was one issue, the cartel faced another, more elementary one though, and that issue was neatly organizing the banknotes. According to Roberto Escobar, the Medellin Cartel spent an estimated $2,500 each month on rubber bands needed to hold stacks of bills together. How he used to spend his money. Eccentric billionaires have unexplainable ways to spend money. Pablo used to keep a lot of exotic animals at his place. In the late 1980s, Colombian drug lord Pablo Escobar kept 4 hippopotamuses in a private menagerie at his residence in Hacienda Naples, 100 kilometers east of Medellin, Colombia. They were deemed too difficult to seize and they moved after Escobar's death and hence left on the untended estate. By 2007, the animals had multiplied to 16 and had taken to roaming the area for food in the nearby Magdalena River. By 2016, upwards of 40 lived in the area. The potentially dangerous animals have damaged farms and inspired fear in locals. Authorities began castrating male hippos in an effort to control the population. In 2013, the National Geographic Channel produced a documentary about them titled Cocaine Hippos. Pablo was a family man. According to his son, he burnt 2 sacks of cash when his daughter suffered from hypothermia. His son claims that he burned around $2 million just to keep his daughter warm. This incident happened when he, along with his family, were on a run and were held up at a hideout in the mountains. In 1991, Escobar was incarcerated in his self-designed prison he named La Catedral. In the terms of his agreement with the Colombian government, Escobar was allowed to select who was imprisoned with him and who worked in the prison. He could also continue to run his cartel business and receive visitors. La Catedral was equipped with a soccer field, barbecue pit, and patios, and it was nearby another compound he built for his family. Also, the Colombian authorities were not allowed within 3 miles of his prison. Fun fact, he was also nicknamed Robin Hood after handing out cash to the poor, building housing for the homeless, and constructing 70 community soccer fields. He even sponsored local soccer teams. His popularity with many Colombians was demonstrated when he was elected to an alternate seat in the country's Congress in 1982. Alas, 2 years later, he was forced to resign after a campaign to expose his criminal activities. The justice minister who led the efforts was assassinated. What could have been done with all that money today? Allow us to reveal some insight into what could be done with $30 billion today. You can support 30,000 students at Harvard University for each of the 4 years of their education, keeping in mind that Harvard is the costliest university on the planet. Also, in the event that you have an interest in thinking about what is there in space for you, that you can make an arrangement with Elon Musk and ask him to make rockets sufficiently large to convoy 100,000 individuals to space. Each ticket would sell for about $200,000. You can likewise go through 30,000 days or approximately 8 years on the planet's most costly lodging, living like royalty and appreciating any remaining extravagant amenities. You can likewise get yourself an island, same as Richard Branson's Necker Island of the Caribbean Sea. As mentioned earlier, his net worth was $30 billion in his peak time, but no one knows the exact wealth he earned, and since that money is not in the cash flow of the world, the next time you try to jot down the reasons of poverty in this world, write his name as well. DEA records say that wealth is around $1.2 billion US, which is buried in no man's land. If that motivates you to go out for finding all that money, that means our job is done. To motivate you even more, a nephew of drug lord Pablo Escobar's said he has found $25 million in cash hidden in the wall of one of his infamous criminal homes. So guys, now we believe that we've given you a fair idea of Pablo's wealth, and now it's time for us to sign off. Do let us know what you would do with such a hefty amount of hard cash. If you liked the video, do leave us a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel. We'll catch you in the next one. Until then,